It's happened again. All set to do a very specific show today. A block, B block, C block, all planned out, people booked, ready to go, scripts in. We know our reporting, we're ready. And all planned out. New breaking news. Throw everything out the window. This is the new schedule. This is how we work now. You wait long enough into the evening without getting too drunk to pay attention to the news, and you'll find that something breaks and changes your plans. Monday evening, it was President Trump passing on classified intelligence to the Russians in the Oval Office. Tuesday night, it was the existence of a memo from fired FBI Director James Comey describing a conversation in which he says the president asked him to back off the FBI investigation of former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. Last night, it was the appointment of a special counsel to take over the Trump-Russia investigation. Now it's the fourth day of the week, and so now we got a new one. Tonight's scoop comes courtesy of Michael Schmidt at the New York Times. Here's the story. Quote, President Trump called the FBI director, James Comey, weeks after he took office and asked him when federal authorities were going to put out word that Mr. Trump was not personally under FBI investigation. Mr. Comey told the president that if he wanted to know details about the Bureau's investigations, he should not contact him directly, but instead should follow proper procedures and have the White House counsel send any inquiries to the Justice Department. At the time, Mr. Comey was, in fact, overseeing the FBI's investigations into links between Mr. Trump's associates and Russia. These interactions included a dinner in which associates of Mr. Comey say Mr. Trump asked him to pledge his loyalty, and a meeting in the Oval Office at which Mr. Trump told him he hoped Mr. Comey would shut down an investigation into Mike Flynn. The day after the Flynn conversation, Reince Priebus, the White House chief of staff, asked Mr. Comey to help push back on reports in the news media that Trump's associates had been in contact with Russian intelligence officials during the campaign. Mr. Comey described all of his encounters with the president and the White House, including the phone call from Mr. Trump, in detailed memos that he wrote at the time and gave to his aides. So not memo, but memos. And not just pressure from the president to the FBI director on the Flynn case, but pressure from the president to the FBI director about investigations into the president himself. And then the White House chief of staff, Reince Priebus, following that up with additional pressure on the FBI director directly from the White House chief of staff immediately following one of those apparently inappropriate conversations between the president and the director of the FBI overseeing those investigations. Ever since we learned on Tuesday night of the existence of the apparent Comey memo about the conversation in which the president asked him to tank the investigation into Mike Flynn, ever since that bombshell report on Tuesday, we have had supplemental reporting. We've been hearing from various Comey associates and former colleagues that the memos thing was for real, that not only is it tradition and procedure in the FBI to write down things as they happen, to keep a detailed written log of events, particularly controversial events, Comey himself, we keep hearing, was a prolific, prodigious writer of memos, particularly when he was involved in meetings or he was around events which might come into question later. We were told we should expect more of those memos to begin surfacing now that he's been fired by Donald Trump. We started getting those warnings Tuesday night. Here we are, Thursday night. And apparently, we've now got a bead on the next memo. According to this new reporting tonight from Michael Schmidt at the New York Times, these newly reported memos describe what James Comey perceived to be a pattern of unsettling behavior from the White House. People who have these memos now or have seen them are describing them to, among others, Michael Schmidt at the New York Times. But again, this story that he's just broken tonight, that's on the front page of the New York Times website, is that in addition to the alleged direct pressure by the president on Director Comey to kibosh the Mike Flynn Trump-Russia investigation, apparently the president, or reportedly the president, called the FBI director and pressured him to put out public word about Trump not personally being under investigation. That was followed up by Reince Priebus, the White House chief of staff, also personally asking the FBI director to push back on reports in the news media that Trump associates had been in contact with Russian intelligence. Joining us now is Michael Schmidt. He's a New York Times reporter who broke this latest story tonight. Mr. Schmidt, I know we're getting you on very short notice. This is just posted. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, let me just ask if I have nutted up this part of your story correctly. Did I get anything wrong there?
No, you got it right. I mean, the thing that we were excited about in this story is that we have one of Mr. Comey's friends on the record, Ben Wittes, talking about a lunch he had with Comey in March, in which Comey described all the frustrations that he had, but Comey thought that he had actually gotten the White House to a place where they understood the lanes of the road, and he's sitting there at the end of March saying, I think that we may have trained them, and we think they may understand what they can and cannot do.
Why is Mr. Wittes coming forward now? Again, it's phenomenal and welcome to have a source actually put his or her name on reporting related to this story, because so much, particularly in national security reporting, is anonymous these days, even when it is active government public officials serving as the contacts for reporters. Do we know what motivated Mr. Wittes to describe his conversations with Mr. Comey? And importantly, do we know if Mr. Comey has sort of greenlit him to do this?
So, Wittes is a friend of Comey's, not an extremely close friend. He would have lunch with him every few months, but Wittes saw what happened to Comey and the fact that the loyalty dinner came out. And actually, Wittes didn't know about the specific loyalty dinner. He knew there was a question of whether Comey was going to give his loyalty to Trump. And Wittes said, you know what, these conversations with Comey were supposed to be confidential, but so much has happened since then. I think the public needs to know about what was going through Jim Comey's head in March, because it's important pieces of the puzzle. Comey did not tell Wittes to do this. This was Wittes' idea, and I sat down with him last Friday in his office and spoke to him a few times since then, and he provided important texture and context to what Comey was looking at.
Michael, in terms of the question that a lot of people are starting to ask now about potential obstruction of justice, or even in less legalistic terms, whether there have been efforts by the White House to either shape or stop the inquiries into potential collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. It's very interesting that you're able to report this piece about how Comey felt like he was able to kind of teach the president what was appropriate and what was inappropriate, and was able to sort of correct him when the president inappropriately contacted him and pressured him about that investigation. You also described, though, that White House Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus, who's a political pro, has having also directly contacted the FBI director and asked him to make essentially public, or at least representations to reporters about the Trump-Russia investigation outside of his lane as the FBI director. Is that something that Director Comey put sort of in the same category as an inappropriate communication, or is that a totally
Correct.
separate matter?
Wittes said that Comey was disgusted by what Priebus had done, and that he saw it as part of the inappropriate contacts that were going on between the Justice Department, between the FBI and the White House. And it troubled him, because he said, look, there's no reason the White House, the DOJ has these guidelines that say you're at the White House and you want to talk to the FBI about an investigation, you have to go through DOJ. And Priebus was directly appealing to Comey, who at the time was overseeing the Russia investigation. So this was part of these things that piled up in front of Comey. But by the end of March, Comey's thinking, all right, well, we think they may have figured out what they can and cannot do. The question is that the White House has still not provided a coherent answer for why Comey was fired. There's all been conflicting answers, everything they've said on the record. So the question is that did the White House realize by the end of March that they weren't going to win Comey over? And was that when they realized that Comey was not going to be the person they wanted running the FBI?
Because, of course, it was, implicit in that choice is that it's unacceptable, and it was never going to happen that they would just leave the investigation alone and expect somebody who couldn't be pressured on it to continue with it. If they exerted this pressure, he resisted, and then they fired him. The question is what their expectations were in terms of how much they could direct this investigation, and I guess that's still the unanswered question here.
Well, as I've said, this all makes a lot of sense in hindsight. The idea that we thought that a relationship between Jim Comey and Donald Trump was going to work is like, we should have seen this coming a lot earlier. Donald Trump is someone who prizes loyalty. Jim Comey is someone who prizes independence. the idea that this was going to work with the backdrop of the Russia investigation, it shouldn't. In hindsight, it doesn't look like it should have been a surprise to us at all.
New York Times reporter Michael Schmidt having broken tonight's story. Comey said to have become unsettled by interactions with Trump. Mr. Schmidt, thank you. Congratulations on this story. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.